Welcome, everyone, to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin. I'm here with Coach Katie, and today's episode is 107. And today we're going to come to you with a topic on heat acclimation. But before we dig into this, Katie and I have been discussing a little bit. We're in the heat of summertime right now, and so there's races that are taking place all over. I know that with my race day coaching tour, I'm at race venues a lot more than I'm used to, and with my active athlete roster, we've come to the conclusion that we're going to go back to our one episode per week until we get on the other side of summer. We want to make sure that we're bringing you good quality episodes and not just I'm just going to throw out an episode just to have it out there. So while we get through the summer with our own training, our own athletes, and all the other stuff that goes along with being coaches and business owners, we're going to go back to one episode, make sure it's a nice quality episode for you, and then once we get on the other side of that, we'll address maybe going back to two episodes. I know that I've got some race plans of my own that are in the mix, but I have not pulled a trigger yet, so I'm not quite sure if I'll do maybe another little documentary on that prep.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, me too. I have the High Rocks
yeah,
race so I feel like people are listening to those, but if you do like those race like training updates that we're doing, I know I did my Road to Grandma's and then you did your last half Ironman for Florida like last year. I feel like please let us know because I feel like I do see people listening, but I don't know if, people are enjoying those or not. So we would love that feedback because if you do, we would be, I mean, those are kind of fun to do in a way, but I just want to make sure it's something worth
yeah.
my time and people are actually listening because I have that High Rocks. I would probably be able to do some updates for that, that's in November. So keep us updated. Let us know if you enjoy listening to those and yeah, that sort of content. And then, I've done the deep dives and things like that too. It's always helpful to know if those are interesting because I
Yeah.
would be able to do some more of those maybe once we get back from this
Well,
summertime.
maybe what we'll do is we'll put a couple polls out in our
No, that would be
closed
helpful.
Facebook
Yeah.
group and see if you would like to sound in on if you find those particular kinds of episodes helpful or entertaining, useful to you. We'll go ahead and we'll throw a poll out there. So if you're not in the group, go out and look for the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group. It's a closed group on Facebook. You answer one simple question and agree to the group rules. It'll let you right on in, and we'll have that poll pinned to the top of the thread. And we'll let the listeners tell us what they think and what they like.
That would
That'll
be
be
great.
one way that we can start to interact a little bit more. I've got some ideas that are floating around in my head for that closed Facebook group to increase some engagement. So that's going to be the first thing we're going to do.
Yeah, that'd be great. Make sure
Yeah.
to
So
to vote.
yeah, be sure to check that out. I will get that out pretty soon. So I know that this episode is going to air in the next couple days. So I'll make sure to get it out there when we publish the episode so that it's available. So Katie, I know that you just finished Grandma's, and so let's do like a little chit chat back and forth. What is it that we're doing right now? I'm feeling like super distracted
I
right now, so
know
I'm trying to get
you're busy with stuff,
my
and
brain
I'm
to get fired up right now and get
yeah.
focused. So Katie, tell me what you've been up to. What do you got on the
Well, I
burners?
took an entire week off after like I didn't do anything, literally nothing. Maybe some walking around, but that's it. After Grandma's, I kind of needed like really needed like a full reset. I think. If you were listening to my Road to Grandma's, my kind of marathon recap, you'll get the gist of it. But I didn't reach my PR goal, but I'm actually okay okay with it, just given how difficult that race was. It was one of those that really makes you contemplate things a little bit, and sometimes those races are necessary to make us sort of realize I don't know what we're really training for and what my goals are. So I don't see myself doing another marathon anytime real soon. And if I do, I'm going to change the way I approach it. But I think at this point, I am pretty content with what I've achieved with the marathon. That was my 11th marathon. So I'm not saying I'll never do another one again. It just may be different the way I approach it and how I set my goals for it. So I'm kind of a little bit at peace with it. But I did need a big reset, sort of just some time off from running completely and training. And luckily, with the travel, that made it easy because I didn't really have any temptation to run. We were pretty busy traveling in Minnesota, and then we traveled through the Badlands National Park and Rushmore and the Crazy Horse statue, or it's not really a statue, it's like a major carving in the side of a mountain, but there was a couple of cool things we saw in the Black Hills, and we drove home, and so I got back, and then all day Sunday, I was cleaning, so I did a little bit of movement, but I really didn't start moving again until the last few days, and I didn't even wear my watch because part of the issue with the traveling, and I mentioned this in my road to grandma's, but we ended up having some stress with traveling, and I didn't bring my watch charger. I had to leave that with my mom, and she had to ship a bunch of stuff out to us, so I didn't have, like, a running watch for several days, so I had which was kind of almost liberating. I'm like, I don't have
Yeah.
anything. I just would go run on my treadmill, and I just was like, I'm gonna try to do 20 minutes and just do whatever I feel like really easy. And so I wasn't recording anything, any heart rates. So it's been kind of nice. I think today's the first day I wore my watch and just kind of ran outside. And I'm just not really doing anything, any sort of scheduled plan. I'm just trying to slowly get back into running and slowly get back into strength training. And I might do like a mile race, like literally just a fast mile in August. But I think my next race isn't going to be until October, and it's a 5K, and then I have the High Rocks and then maybe another 5K. So that's about all I'm probably going to do the rest of this year. So I don't have the
Yeah.
High Rocks is exciting because that one is just a totally out of my wheelhouse kind of situation. So, very totally new to me, just totally something I've never done before. So that'll be a big one, but I'm not even doing a half marathon, I don't think. I think I'm just gonna focus on speed. So I'm I'm actually really excited about it. But yeah, that's my update. Just trying to ease back in slowly. I really want to make sure that I am ready to run again, and I'm excited too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no major other updates. How about you?
Yeah.
What are you training like, what are you training for now? I know you're busy with, like, coaching stuff and, going to the races as a coach, because you were just at
Yeah.
which race were you just at? Can't
Yeah.
remember.
So we went to the Colonial Beach. It's the Kinetic Multisport. It was the Colonial Beach Sprint and Olympic Triathlon. So it was on a Sunday, and it was down in Colonial Beach, Virginia. I had a fantastic time. I love the Kinetic Multisport race. These guys put on a fabulous race, and I have no problem plugging them on this podcast. I've done many of their races. That's where many of my podiums have come from. And Greg, who runs the company, he puts on a fantastic race. Great venues, well organized, well supplied, and the vibe of the athletes is just really, really awesome. Been to a few of their races this year as the race day coaching tour, and so what that is I decided this year to just kind of be a servant to athletes. So I bought a big 10 by 10 canopy tent and got some materials and put together a table and all kinds of stuff and made a big old banner and just called New to Triathlon, Ask a Coach. And so what it is, it's kind of an extension of the Triathlon 101 series that I put together, where I'm now going and face-to-face interacting with athletes and answering questions for them. So whatever their question is, they show up at the race venue, and we're there at packet pickup, which is typically like that Friday or the day before the race happens. We're there at packet pickup, all set up and ready to go. And then we're there throughout the entire race day, answering last minute questions, helping people out. This is the second time I was able to do a transition clinic. And so right after the athlete briefing during packet pickup, I'll go through a short demonstration on how to set up your transition area and kind of point out to the athletes like where they're going to be going, like the logistics of the day. So it's just like, that's where you're going to come out of the water, and that's where you go into transition, and then that's where you leave to go on the bike, and that's where the mountain line is going to be. So I'm really kind of like just helping them out. There's absolutely zero expectations, and I'm having a really good time. Mainly, I wanted to do this as a little caveat because I'm a very like introverted person, and so I have a hard time just interacting with people. I'm super envious of those people that can just walk up to anybody and just start talking. But I'm that's just never been me, and I think that that's an important characteristic to develop as a coach is just the ability to just interact with people and be a little bit more of an extrovert, or at least fake it to where they don't realize that you're so introverted.
Right.
And so I really wanted to hone in on that skill set and start to develop, I don't want to say my communication skills or my people skills, but bottom line, that's kind of what it is. And just really improve in that area of my life. So that's where the business is going. I just launched a special training team or special training group for the Richmond Tri Club, which is here in my area. We have a club race, and it's another kinetic race, so it's called the Giant Acorn Race, and it's another sprint and Olympic race that's in September. So I've put together an Olympic training group and a sprint training group for members of the Richmond Tri Club, where I will provide them a race specific coaching plan to get through. And so I just launched that yesterday, this week. And so training starts for the Olympic team on Monday. So that's another thing. So it required a special page that I had to build for the website and all that kind of stuff, which is super time consuming. My athlete roster is growing, so I'm thankful for Tabula Rasa Racing, increasing the athlete roster. I'm still trying to decide on like what I'm doing as an athlete. So that's all the coaching stuff. So you can kind of see there's a lot that's going on in the coaching aspect. But as an endurance athlete myself, I went into the year with just the expectation of just finishing off the 2 races that I had already signed up for at the end of last year. I think I talked about it on one other episode. Before I did Ironman Florida, I had signed up for the Smithfield Sprint and the Jamestown Olympic, both with Kinetic Multisports, and I signed up on a Black Friday kind of thing. And so after Florida, I was like, I really don't want to race, but I felt that I should. And come to find out, both of those races I grabbed podiums for, and so I'm super thankful for that. But it left me kind of feeling like I didn't want it. I didn't want to finish. I want to still compete. I want to still be in the mix. But with everything that's going on as a coach and, my other full-time job that, actually pays the bills, it's challenging to try and juggle these things. So I'm trying to figure out what's more important, growing the business or growing as an athlete. But I want to compete. And so I'm trying to figure out how to do that. And still not dig myself in such a massive hole, both physically, mentally, emotionally. So I've not pulled the trigger yet, so I don't want to commit to it on air until I actually do it, but I'm about 90% there. So I'm about to pull the trigger on a method that I've never done before. So I don't want to go into too much because I'll give it all away, and I don't want to do that because I haven't pulled the trigger yet. So
Yeah.
I don't want to be pigeonholed to it, but
Don't
it's
don't put
I think it's
yourself
going to
out
be
if you're
really
too
fun.
excited.
It's going to be
Yeah.
a different way of training for me and a different aspect of racing, and I'm kind of excited about it, but I'm still kind of nervous at the same time. So I haven't pulled the trigger.
Right.
Um,
That makes sense.
and I still
Yeah.
have the desire to go and get my certified strength and conditioning
Yeah.
coach certification to kind of round out my coaching
Mhm.
expertise. I know that you and I have talked about that as well. So I'm trying to figure out like how to put that into the mix while also redesigning and relaunching my website on a different platform. So I've
Right.
got to So if there's anybody who's out there who is a web developer who would love to do this on a discount basis, or even I can barter and I can do some training plans for you and you'll rebuild my website, reach out and let me know, because I'd be willing to talk about that.
Right.
So
There you go.
take one more thing off my plate. But from the sounds of it, I've just got a lot going on. I think this is why I think going to the one episode a week isn't
Yeah.
something that I want to do, because I really enjoy doing this. But I don't want to do a bunch of things poorly. I'd rather do a
Mhm.
couple things
That's
really
fair.
well.
That's yeah.
And so
No, I agree
there's
with you, and I think
decisions that I
people
had
for
to
the
make.
most
So
part will understand. They would want what we're they would wanna listen to something that they feel like we've put some thought into versus, like, just putting something out, so, and I think we'll be back to it, like, maybe if we do sign up for something, if people are enjoying those, race prep or kind of the
yeah,
updates on how our, race prep is going, I think then I would love to continue doing that. I mean, like I said, this whole High Rocks thing for me is gonna be a totally new thing, so I'd love to share, like, my journey if people are interested, so just let us know in that poll or reach out, but I think it's interesting you kinda mentioned something that I think I'm also going through is that, the amount of time it takes to train, like, how much I've been thinking a lot about how much time I've put into the marathon to grandma's, and this is there's no guarantee, and I put in a lot of work, and it didn't go exactly as I was planning, and I think I'm just coming to a conclusion now that I have other things that I want to accomplish, like the CSCS, the strength and conditioning certification. I do want to work a little bit more on my business. I want to continue the podcast. And so there are a lot of things I want to do, and spending hours training, like several hours a week training, is just takes a lot of time. So that's kind of also
yeah,
why I've decided to just do some shorter races and focus a little differently. But it is I've been yeah, I'll be curious when you just if you d when and if you decide, like, I know, what you're talking about, like, a different method, but I know
yeah,
if I ever do a marathon again, the way I approach it will be a bit different, and it'll be an interesting experiment to try maybe less volume and sort of a different way to approach it, because I feel like we're always told as athletes the more you do, the more volume you do, the better you're gonna be, and I'm sort of questioning that a little bit, like, is that maybe that's true, but is there other ways you can go about it and still get a good result? It may not be the
yeah,
very best result, but it may be still good. So, yeah, I'll be curious. You'll have to, like, keep us updated with what you
yeah.
decide, but like anything,
I got to
don't do
make the
too
decision
much.
quick. So because training has to start, but I've never really stopped training. So even since the last race that I did, I still have continued to build and build and build, and
Mhm.
just it's got a little bit less of a focus, but the volume is still there. So that's why I'm not too concerned about oh, I need to make this decision, in order for training to start, because it's already there. It just needs to be dialed in a little bit more specific, for the endeavor that would be undertaken. But
Right, yeah, that
um,
makes sense.
I think it's good.
Well, I'll keep
All right, so
keep me
let's get into
posted. Yeah,
this.
keep us posted. So let's dig in.
Yeah,
I mean, I think this episode's timely because it's getting hot. Let's face it. There's lots of,
yeah,
like, heat advisories. I don't know, Europe is getting some sort of crazy heat dome. So I mean, the people over there, I don't even know if I would advise people to train in the heat that they're having, but, um, so, yeah, and then, I think I talked to also in my grandma's marathon episodes, at least a few of them, about my own experimentation with some more passive heat and a little bit like it got a little bit warm a few days, so I did run in the heat, but some of my passive heat training, experiments. So this is probably a timely discussion, I would say. So I don't know, how do you wanna get started with this? Like, what are your I know you had some thoughts.
yeah. Heat has been in the news a lot, even in the endurance world, mainly because they just canceled Ironman France 70.3. So it was
Mhm.
in Nice. They canceled that with only 48 hours notice. It was super, super short. People were there picking up race packets, and then they just outright canceled the whole thing. It was not done because Ironman wanted to cancel it. It was kind of handed down to them by French regulators,
The
and they're just like,
authorities, yeah.
we're nixing this. We don't want to overload hospitals and everything else because there's, medical staff that's going to be needed in order to support races and things. And knowing there are athletes out there that fail to acclimate for the environment, and you can only imagine like what that stress would be on the resources of that particular area. Ironman
Mhm.
Frankfurt, which is at Frankfurt, Germany. It was a full Ironman. They shortened that one to they shortened the marathon down to a half marathon because of the heat. And so this is something that's been rolling around just over the past week or so. I'm kind of torn because for me as an endurance athlete, I understand that's part of the gig, right? We these are summertime races, so you can't sign up for a race that's in June or July or August and say, "Oh, I'm not gonna be concerned about the heat." And not be prepared. So part of
Mhm.
me is just like, I wish that they wouldn't have canceled the races, but left it up to the athlete to determine on what it is that they wanted to do. Because these athletes spend months and months and months training for these events just to have the rug pulled out from under them 48 hours before
I know, I mean,
the race
imagine
is going
being
to start.
traveling
But
that far
yeah,
to, like, France, and
so
then you put all that
these
effort in, and you have your bike
yeah.
shipped and all these things, and all of us and they're just like, "Yeah, we're not doing it."
I mean, these
That would
these
be
are adults, and so
frustrating.
they're
Yeah.
responsible enough to make a decision on what it is that they want to do, and if they're willing to undertake the risk that's tied to doing it, and if they're just going to adjust their execution strategy to control for the environment. So I don't know if I completely agree with the decision to cut races short because of the heat, but I
Yeah.
understand that there's a large segment of athletes that think it was the right call to make, um, thinking of taking the larger view of it. But again, I don't think it was the right call. I think it should be up to the athlete on whether they're willing to undertake the risk. And
Yeah, maybe they could have had an option. I don't know if it would've been that easy to be
yeah,
like,
I mean,
"Okay,
you
you can
can't
do a
really you can't
shorter."
really
Yeah.
sign away complete liability. So
Yeah.
if some athlete would have gone out there and said, "I'm willing to take the risk," and then heaven forbid
Not
something
prepared.
happened,
Mhm.
um, you know, it would still be, the liability would still fall under Ironman on whether, whether they would be financially responsible or if it would open them up to litigation. I don't really know because, I mean, you can't really sign away all liability just by
Right.
signing a couple waivers. It doesn't work that way. So
Yeah,
uh,
that
I
is a
guess we have to
question.
we have to really keep in mind that this is a business that
Mhm.
these guys are running, and they have to weigh the risk that they're willing to take by holding events. I understand it. So I think that because I question the call, I question it because I'm a little bit more emotionally involved. Like if I had
Mhm.
just spent 6 months training for a race and it got yanked from under me. It was something that I can't control. It wasn't a decision that I made and say I'm not willing to take on that risk. I think I would have had a difficult time making that decision. And so I'm a little bit more emotionally connected because I know what it would have felt like. So I don't know if I can
Yeah.
make a rational call like that. So I don't know if I would ever be a very good race director. I don't think that that's a job for me.
Yeah, I feel like there's
But
a few reasons why maybe that wouldn't be
yeah,
a
I just
job
can't
for
do
me,
it.
but that might be one of them. Is
Um,
the weather, it's already hard enough as an athlete, like, worrying about the weather on race day, you know what I mean? To have to be
yeah,
like a race director and make those calls, because I could see it from both perspectives. That's
yeah,
a little bit, because I can also see it from the perspective of, like, the race director and the authorities, and I can definitely see the reasoning there if hospitals are already kind of full or at capacity because of the heat, and they're worrying about then having all of these people competing and maybe some of them not being prepared enough. And sometimes the heat, even when you're acclimated to it, it's hard to acclimate it to it and be prepared for like that length of a race. There's so
yeah,
many possibilities that could go wrong. I could definitely see why they would do that. It's just it does, from an athlete perspective, it does kind of make me upset thinking if I were in the shoes of someone who had traveled that far and put in that effort, and then yeah, we're canceling and I'm already there, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I've paid all this money, I've done all this training, and from that perspective, I can see. So I definitely see both sides of it, and I think it's tough. And I honestly, maybe, this might be a weird year, but I feel like there might be have to be some thought about when these races are happening, and maybe it's gonna just get too risky to have those types of races in some of these hotter summer months. And the races are gonna have to be moved to earlier in the spring or later in the fall, in some
Yeah,
of these locations.
they
I don't
did
know,
they
like.
did that they did that with Ironman Louisville.
Mhm.
It used to be in August, and it just, I mean, going to Louisville, right there at that time, it was brutal. I mean, it was just cooking, like racing on the sun. And then they moved the race to October and basically killed the race. I mean,
Oh,
so
interesting,
they
okay.
ended up, the locality just didn't want it anymore, and it was no longer kind of the same race. But I mean, there was Ironman Chattanooga one year that was, had one of the highest DNF rates because of the heat, and then the very next year it was fine.
Mhm.
But I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm kind of
sometimes it's
torn.
hard because then you have all these months, like, we're not gonna you already have
Yeah,
several winter
you
months,
can't
you can't
cram you
do.
can't cram like 20 races in the
Yeah,
span of like 3 months in the spring, and then 3 months in the fall, and
right.
expect to still be able to offer as many races to people that is
Yeah.
being demanded. So I mean, it's got to be a hard business decision on whether you start moving races because of the environment in which they're
Mhm.
in.
And the
I don't know.
risk of the heat or
It's a
something,
hard
yeah,
it's a
it's a
hard
hard
call to
one.
make.
I think it is a hard call to make, and I can like I said, see it from both angles. But let's just, like, I don't know, like, let's kind of shift a little bit. Like, I'm curious, like, if somebody does have, because I'm assuming, like, hopefully most of the people who were training, that might be where it's frustrating, is maybe you were training for that race in
Yeah.
France and you're like, I've been doing the heat training, like I was ready for that. And they cancel, because then you're even more frustrated because you're like, I've done the heat training. But I'm going to suppose that there might be like a certain level of people or a certain amount of people who had signed up for that race that hadn't even considered being prepared, even though they signed up for like a race in June, which
Yeah.
you probably should be aware that it might be hot, and so maybe some sort of acclimation to the heat would be smart. Like, maybe, there are probably some subset of people who didn't and who would have probably really suffered and
Yeah.
maybe been in the medical tent. So maybe we can shift a little bit to like why, for races in this time frame, assuming we're going to continue to have races in June, July, August, even September can be kind of tricky
Yep.
a little bit. It can still be warm, and that's like 4 months out of the year. So assuming we're still going to have races, then you know w- why is it so important to be
Yeah, the way
ready,
the way
right?
that I view it is that we spend all this time researching and building the best training plan that we can come up with, the most creative workouts that we can think of, all the specificity that we're going to need in order to conquer a particular race course. And then we work really hard on dialing in our nutrition. We're buying all these expensive products that we're going to use to fuel us on race day, and we spend money on recovery tools, compression boots, massage therapy, PT. We do all this other kind of stuff in order to make us physically prepared to endure training and to execute on race day. But I feel very little thought is given to what I'll call the systemic risk of race day. And to me, heat and altitude
Mhm.
represent two of the systemic risks that an athlete faces. It does not matter how physically prepared you are, how well trained you are, how consistent you've been. If you're racing in the heat and you have not prepared your body to handle the heat, I don't care how deep your fitness is. If you're going to a race that is at altitude and you have not acclimated to what it feels like to breathe in those conditions and your body is not prepared, again, I do not care how fit you are and how prepared you feel, because your race is, I seriously question on how you're going to be able to execute that race without adjusting your expectations. So if you're looking for PRs or you're looking for particular performance goals and you have not evaluated the systemic risk that your body is going to be under in those conditions, then you've only done part of the job.
Yeah.
And I'll own it. I did that as an athlete myself early, when I was racing early, when I first started into the sport. I didn't prepare myself for the heat. When it got hot outside, I would stay inside. And when I would go to race, it was a huge, rude awakening on what it was like. And there were many times I was resulted to walk more than I wanted to, found myself in the medical tent more times than what I would really like to, hooked up to IVs and things. And so I own the mistake as well.
Mhm.
So, but it hasn't been until recently to when I really start to sit down and think about, hey, I'm giving all this time and thought to building the best training plan, but it doesn't matter how well this plan is if I can't race in the heat. And so I said, well, I can either stop racing in the heat and just do races in October and November, or in, March and April, and just that's my race time. Or I can learn how to prepare my body to be in that environment. And so I had to sit down and think about, how am I going to do this? And how am I going to do it in a way that allows me to be consistent in my training and not dig myself such a deep hole because I'm executing workouts in adverse conditions, to where I can still be consistent and recover.
Right.
So it takes a lot of thought
Yeah, I
and,
feel
and a
like
lot of
I mean, I'm
preparation
the
for
type
it.
of person that avoids racing in the heat. So I'm
Yeah.
like the I'm like the one that doesn't race, and like, if it's a short race, I will, but I generally avoid like, I generally wouldn't sign up for a marathon. In fact, June doing grandma's was risky because I knew it's generally cool that time of year, but I knew it could be warm,
Hmm.
and that was almost, like, kinda getting on the risky end of things for me. Usually, I won't sign up for anything like that between June until yeah, through September, and the
Yeah.
only times I generally look at marathons are early spring or fall, into maybe December, or sometimes if it's, like, Arizona, maybe January or February, but, so I'm the type of person in that other scenario of avoiding races that are gonna matter, like a longer duration race in the heat.
Yeah.
Um, and then when it comes to altitude, like, I always look for races that are at sea level, like, because I'm taking the advantage I have as training at, like, a mile high and
Yeah.
going to sea level. So generally, I do agree with you. I think it's harder maybe to figure out when you're training at sea level how to get altitude training, but heat training is they call it the poor man's altitude, so maybe there's
Yep.
something to heat training and altitude as well and benefiting you there. But um I think there's still benefits, but, for grandmas, I wasn't doing heat training. I mean, in a way, I guess it might have helped me if it was hot at grandma's, but I wasn't heat training and doing the sauna work because I was worried about the heat. I was doing it because I wanted to continue the benefit of my altitude training and do it, try to sort of keep some of that plasma volume and red blood cells
Hmm.
elevated so I could continue to not lose that benefit. And so regardless as if you have a hot race or you're training for a race in the summer, I still think athletes could really benefit from heat training in terms of performance or some of the benefits regardless. So I'm going to put that out there too, is it's like, yeah, of course, if you're training it for a race in the heat of the summer months, it's probably necessary if not mandatory, but considering it for other benefits, maybe
Yes.
even if you like, I do think for sure I notice a huge benefit when I've been training in the heat all summer, and then I do that October race, but
Hmm.
when it's cool. Like, all those
Right.
benefits of getting acclimated when I do race and it's in a perfect, or cooler temperature, I generally have some of my best races I've noticed kind of in that fall timeframe after I've been running in the heat all summer, so I do think there's something to that as well as a consideration here, so yeah, I don't know,
Yeah.
like
If you
yeah.
if you don't have access to altitude, I mean, heat training is going to be your next best bet, unless you're willing to take some time to go to altitude in order to get some of that acclimation that's there. But it's hard to hold on to it, um, And especially if you're going from altitude to sea level, you have to time it just right in order to be able to maintain that advantage. And I think if you hadn't done the heat training that you did, and because the extra time that you spent at sea level before the race, I think you lost a lot of your advantage
I think I did.
from training in
Mhm.
altitude. So the
I think I
question
did even with
becomes,
the heat training, to be honest.
yeah, I think you spent a lot of time at sea level. I think if you may have been able to time that a little bit better, you might
Yeah.
have been a little bit more advantaged. But it was outside of your control because you had other like family engagements that was the reason that you went there.
Yeah, and it's hard to say.
Um,
I mean, there's so many I mean, I did the heat, it might have helped a little bit, and maybe I could have timed it a little better to do more of it. I don't know if I just didn't do enough of it, but I also I mean, there's that factor, I think that played a role. And then, so there's maybe 5 minutes there or something. But I also think that that flu, that I got and the struggle I had after that, it just was part of it too. So there's
yeah,
so many factors that kind of probably went into why that didn't go the way I was hoping, but I do think the altitude and I knew and that was one of my fears too, and I knew it, but a good lesson to learn is next time I will,
yeah.
not plan it out quite that way. I'll try to make sure that I time it a little better, but there is an advantage, and unfortunately, I do think on the flip side of it, you lose the altitude training effect fairly quickly. I mean, really, when I was reading, it was within 1 to 2 weeks, you can
Yes.
lose a lot of that, and so that was why I was worried about it, but to gain the benefit of it, I feel like when I was doing research before at altitude training, it can take, like, 2 to 3 weeks to gain the benefit, to have all those adaptations, so
Yeah.
the tough part is do you if you have a race at altitude, how do you manage that? Do you, go up to altitude, like, 2 to 3 weeks before your race? Like, if you work remotely, maybe you can, I'm thinking someone who wants to train and race, like, the Leadville 100, where it starts at 10,000 feet, the race. That is the where Leadville is located, you know what I mean?
Right.
And you go up
Yeah.
to close to maybe 13,000, 14,000, close to, like, it's a really high, race, and I really just don't think you can go from sea level and do that race in any capacity where you're gonna have a fantastic day. You might be able to complete it, but that lack of oxygen is just gonna get you pretty badly. It
Yeah.
gets me when I'm out where I'm at in
Right.
Denver or around Denver, go up there. Like, that 10,000 feet still gets to me, and I'm more acclimated. So, I think
I
that's a
think in order
tough one.
to be completely acclimated, you do need that longer duration. But I
Mhm.
think the research was also showing us that even if you were there for 3 days, the body starts the acclimation
Right.
process within 3 days. So if you can arrive at your race venue uh, at a minimum 3 days before, then the body starts the acclimation process. You're not going to be fully acclimated, but the
Right.
body has started the adjustment. So, you know, I know it would be really
Uh,
challenging in order to say, okay, well, I'm just gonna spend 2 weeks at the race venue in order to
yeah,
be
that might be hard.
prepared,
But
and
even a
thinking
week, like
that's your only option. It's not your only option, but if you want full acclimation, then yeah, that's probably the case. But
yeah,
I don't want you showing up like the day before, because it's that second day which is the worst day of your body's reaction to the change in altitude. So if you can get past that second day and race on that third day, that's better than
be
racing
better,
on the
yeah.
second one.
Or if you have, like, a
So
full week or something, maybe better, but and then it's kinda the opposite for for going from altitude to sea level, it's kind of, like, almost more optimal if you go down and almost race, like, within a couple days, I think, is what
yeah,
I've
if you're going
read,
from
yeah.
altitude to sea level, you want to time it such that there's very little time between the time that you
Mhm,
get to the venue and your actual race. So
mhm.
the more time that you're there at sea level, the more your body has starts to lose that acclimation or the advantage that you had from training at altitude. So
That's typically how I've done it, and I've had some good races, so, it may
yeah,
be it may be the lesson to me that the next time I do a marathon if I do want to try to race it fast to time it a little bit better and not time
Yeah.
it along with other things. But,
Well, let's
it is
talk about
interesting. Let's talk about
the
heat though.
physiological.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what the body is doing. I know that we've talked about it before, but let's bring it up in this episode because I think it's worth the discussion on why we think this is important. Somebody could be sitting there, it's just like, why do I care? I don't get it. And so I want to talk a little bit, just briefly, about what's the physiological change that's taking place in the body when racing in the heat. So the way that I look at it is that I want my body to start sweating as quickly as possible. So I don't want to be outside for like an hour or two and my body hasn't really started to sweat yet. I really want it to start to sweat within 5 minutes of just being outside. That's what heat acclimation is. So
Right.
it's the body's reaction to pulling blood to the skin, not to the surface of the skin, but it's the redirection of blood so that the body starts to cool itself. Well,
Mhm.
there's a consequence of that in terms of your ability to absorb and take in nutrition. So if you're training in the heat, you also have to adjust for that. It's like, okay, how am I going to change my nutrition strategy? Because my blood is being redirected for my body to effectively cool itself, which means that there's going to be less blood volume available to help me digest food. So I may need to change from like a solids based nutrition plan to more liquid. So that's a little bit easier for my body to absorb. But you want your body to start to cool it, to attempt to cool itself quicker.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's important.
And that sweat, I
So
think people would think the opposite, like, like, "I'm sweating so much, like, isn't that
yeah, the
bad?"
presence of sweat is not an indication that you're working hard or that
Yeah.
you have a high level of effort going on. No, the presence of sweat is an indication that the body is hot. And so it's trying to cool itself. It has nothing to do with your effort level. So
Or
I don't
and it's not a bad thing, like, the
no, it's a good
sweating is
thing.
a good thing. Like, when
Yes.
I was doing the sauna thing, like, where I was in the sauna, because I don't when I was in Vermont, because I don't use the sauna, I don't have access to one easily. Here, I wish I did. In Colorado, I wish I had one. Um, I just remember, like, sweating profusely, like, I'm in this sauna and I'm, like, sweating, and there's this other woman over there who she's does not I'm thinking to
Yeah.
myself, "Why is it that I'm, like" I mean, I look like I took a shower, I'm sweating, I've got, like,
Yeah.
sweat everywhere, I'm, like, kinda turning red, and she wasn't, but she also she also mentioned she had AFib, and I'm like, "Is it even good to be in the sauna?" I don't know,
Yeah.
but
Ooh.
I'm that after kinda reading some of the benefits and looking through it, I'm like, "Oh, well, it's probably actually that I'm more acclimated to the heat, like, my body is starting to cool like, that maybe is better that I was sweating a lot, and the fact that she wasn't maybe was more concerning." But as
Yeah.
I'm in there with her, I'm like, "Gosh, you don't even look like you're sweating at all," you know? So I was like, "You don't" I'm like, "Look like I've been taking a shower, and you don't even look like you're wet at all." I think that's something people might think, like, in that scenario, like, "Oh, because she's not sweating and she looks cool as a cucumber," in my mind, is the way I thought about it, she's actually more acclimated. But in this sense, it was maybe because I was sweating so much, maybe it was actually that I was more acclimated. I That's something I think people need to think about is yeah, because when I was looking at this woman, I'm like, "What's going on?" But I think it was actually she probably had less acclimation. I just That's just something I think people maybe would get confused when it comes to
Yeah,
just
not sweating when it's hot is a bad sign. It's a
mhm,
bad sign in terms of uh your acclimation. So it's not that, oh, I'm not sweating, I must be heat acclimated. No, it's the complete opposite. It's that quick release of sweat when the body starts to sweat very very quickly or soon, based on your exposure to the heat, that's the indication that your acclimation is improving. And we all have wearables now. So if you have a Garmin, there's a metric that's going to show up on your watch or your bike computer, which measures your heat acclimation. So it tracks how much time that
I
you've
have that.
spent out in the heat, and it measures
Right.
your heart rate and relative to the time that you've been exposed, and it keeps track of your acclimation in terms of a percentage. So it's going to say, your heat acclimation is 60% or 40%. So the goal is to try and get that number higher and higher and higher. Because I've experienced races in really hot conditions where I felt actually fantastic. But I would talk to others and they're just like, "Oh my gosh, the heat is so brutal. It just killed me." And I was like, I didn't really feel the heat all that much, and I felt much more prepared. I felt like my performance was better, and they looked like they had just been sent through the ringer, and I felt pretty good. I think it's because I'm very purposeful with my heat acclimation
Mhm.
protocol when I'm preparing for a race, and I'm so glad that it's something that I started doing. And
Right.
even during the race, there's strategies that I use to try and keep the body as cool, because you can't go into a race, you're just like, oh, I'm just going to dump ice down my kit or whatever and try and stay cool. uh, the fact of the matter is that you're not guaranteed that ice, and so if you're relying on something being available on the race course in order to help you manage your body temperature, you're opening yourself up to some more risk that wouldn't be necessary. So when I go through an aid station, I'm grabbing a cup of water. I tell myself I get 2 cups, 1 cup for the mouth, 1 cup for my head.
Mhm.
And I don't rely on ice because it's never guaranteed. It's nice if it's there, so it's a super bonus, but at least the cold water is helpful, and I dump it on my head, because
Yeah, I
that's
do
where
that.
the most of the
Mhm.
heat loss is
Yeah, I just
from.
dump one. Did that
Yep.
during grandma's and even it wasn't that hot, but I'm dumping water on my head and they did have
Yeah.
ice.
Every aid station.
Yeah, if they have ice, I take a little bit. I might put it down my kit, but if you hold on to it,
If you can put
like
it in your
there
hands, yeah.
yeah, there's
Yep.
some like nerve or receptors in your hand, and there's actual research on this. If you can hang on to it, it helps cool you because of the I
Yes.
don't know if there's a specific I don't know if it matters which hand, but so for a lot of it, I would put a few cubes down my shirt just to kinda cool
Mhm.
myself, and then I would hold on to the ice until it melted, and, I don't yeah, I don't think it was the heat that got me in this race because it was only in this, like, low 60s, but,
Right.
I think it helped. I never felt warm or hot, so I think it was helping, but that if you do have the ice or a sponge, this is why if you watch, like, with the Western States Trail 100 that just happened, if you watch any of the coverage, the athletes and obviously this is different than in a race where like an Ironman or a marathon where you don't have the crew to help you, but in a race where there's a crew, this is why watch very carefully. As soon as they get into the aid station, their crew is immediately taking their hat, dunking it in cold water, giving them a cold, like icy, um, something to put around their neck and to cool. Like
Mhm.
it's almost like that's the first thing they're doing before they're even fueling most of the time because it's so hot. They recognize that if they can get the body to cool down, that's gonna help performance. So, watch carefully at what they're doing because, if you are doing like a ultra and you have a crew, that might be something to consider if it's gonna be
Yeah.
hot is having those resources to be able to cool you down. Um, but if you're not acclimated to the heat in the first place, like you're saying, those methods help, but you're still gonna have an influence on performance. So
Yeah, it's like turning a faucet onto a drip, onto a
yeah,
raging fire. Is it
right,
helpful? Maybe, but
right.
it's you're
Maybe
you're
a little
never
bit,
gonna
but
you're
not
never
as
gonna
not
get caught up on that one.
yeah.
So
I think another thing too with those increased sweat rate, there's kinda going through some of the adaptations is, like, the amount of sodium and salt and electrolytes we're
yes,
losing does decrease a little bit, so you lose a little bit more. So you do because you're maybe sweating earlier and you're losing more sweat, you do have to really prioritize hydration
yes,
because you're maybe losing a little bit more water, so you do wanna make sure you're drinking plenty, but when you do lose the sweat, you're not losing as much sodium, so not to say you don't need to take in some still, but you're not you're maybe not needing to take in as much electrolytes as you would otherwise, so I would say that would be a benefit, and there's lowered heart rate. You get the benefit there of maybe even resting heart rate and potentially during exercise, and then just you're helping your body cool. So now your core temperature is lower. And I think that's where people really get into problems is once your core temperature starts to rise to a certain level, that's when things can really start to
Yeah,
become
it
a
started
problem.
then.
Heat
Yeah.
stroke, heat illness. So keeping your core temperature lower is really like, even your base core temperature might be a little bit lower, but in general, just while you're exercising, because heat stroke and heat illness, can be a real problem, so, yeah, those would be I think the big I don't know, is there any other I mean, it's the stroke volume and there is, like, volume like, plasma volume that
Yeah, the
increases
increase in red blood cells.
in red blood yeah, so that's where the heat it's
So
the poor man's altitude because it's
yeah.
different mechanism, but sort of similar outcome, I would say,
It's a
to
different
altitude.
mechanism, but it's still down the same pathway.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, so
you still get there. It's like
mhm.
2 plus 2 is 4, but so is 3 plus 1. So
Right.
it's that kind of mindset. So it's like, oh, okay, well, there's more than one way to do this.
Right.
But it's not the same way, but
Yeah.
it is a way.
Yeah,
Um,
so I guess, like, we're saying all these benefits and, I don't know, but it so what so should someone go through and do heat training in the heat 7 every single run or every single workout 7 days a week and do the sauna?
no,
Is that the way
no,
to do it?
bad decision. So yeah, when it comes to executing a method, in order to heat acclimate, you have to consider the training volume that you're under, as well as the stress that the body is under when it's in the environment. So, like we've said 100 times before, stress is stress. And so heat acclimation is a stressor onto the body, just like going out for a run, ride, or swim, whatever it is that you're doing. So you have to make that adjustment. I don't want you to go out and do your long run. And so let's say that you're out running for 2 hours and then you're going to jump right into the sauna for a little bit. That might be a bad decision because now the body has been under stress for 2 hours of running, and now you're going to force it to be under more stress for another 30 minutes of sitting in a sauna. So you have to consider that,
Mhm.
because your job is to manage the duration in which your body is under stress. And now, rather than recovering from a 2 hour run, you have to recover from a 2.5 hour stress event. So you have to be a little bit more purposeful now on how you're going to recover from that in order to execute the next day's training session. So maybe the way that I approach it, there's two kinds of protocols that you can do. You can either do like a 7-day protocol, in which case you don't have to spend as long doing it, but you have to adjust your training plan to accommodate for the additional stress. So that could be a challenge.
Yeah, 'cause
But
you'd
if
have to
you're
do it, like, every day for
right, if you're under a
7
time
days.
constraint and you say I have to get heat acclimated for my race, you can do it in the span of like 7 to 14 days, but it's very purposeful. It's every single day that you're exposed in order to build that acclimation. So you have to adjust your training plan accordingly so that you don't overstress it. But if you say I want to slow roll this thing a little bit, so I'm on, a 12-week training plan, so I want to slowly accumulate stress so that I don't have to make as such big adjustments to the training volume itself so that I can still perform, then, it's reasonable to throw in a 3-day protocol where 3 days a week, you do some workouts. So I guess there's a distinction that we should make. So I do want to say, okay, yes, now there's a stressor. We can extend the number of sessions that we're doing it over a longer period of time so that we do it less frequently during the week so that we don't have to make as such big adjustments to the training plan. So that means, okay, let's say you choose a short run, a longer bikes, like a moderate bike session, or something like that. You find those workouts where you might be able to say, I can stay in zone 2 for those and use those as your heat acclimation sessions, knowing full well that it's not going to be a zone 2 stressor. It's going to be something that's a little bit higher because heat is the multiplier to that.
Mhm.
Or so that's active heat acclimation, where you're actually in the environment and you're working out. One of the things that I do in my plan is that I don't actually do very many run heat acclimation workouts because for me, running is harder to recover from. And so that multiplier effect is going to be even greater. And so I choose like my bike workouts to be my heat acclimation sessions. My body is not beat up as much when I'm on a bike ride, even if it's a long bike ride. And, let's say I'm on the gravel bike. So it's, hard riding, it's still not as hard on my body as going out for a run. So I save a lot of my heat acclimation, my active heat acclimation for my bike workouts.
Mhm.
It's easier to recover from and it doesn't dig me as deep of a hole. But I also have a passive heat acclimation protocol that I use in conjunction with that. So your passive heat acclimation is going to be things like the hot tub therapy, like the hot tub exposure or sauna exposure. So it can be like a humid sauna or it could be an infrared sauna. It either one works, whatever you have um, access to. I have access to infrared sauna, and I absolutely enjoy that. I love it. And so that's actually a bigger piece of my heat acclimation protocol is the sauna. It's passive. I just do it. Let's say I'll go to the gym and I'll do, a run and then I'll go right from the run into the sauna.
Fun.
And I'm not in there very long and my runs aren't very long either. So I don't go and do like a 2-hour run and then go jump in the sauna. We're talking an hour at most for a run and combine that with a sauna in order to keep my heart rate elevated a little bit more. But that heart rate is going to rise when you're sitting in
Right.
there. So if I look at my watch and I keep track of what my heart rate is while I'm in the sauna and just sitting there, my heart rate can get up to like 120, 125. And so my resting heart rate is in the 50s. So if I'm just sitting there, and my heart rate is already like 4 times what it would normally be just like sitting still in a room in a comfortable environment, you can
Right.
see that's the stressor to the body. And that illustrates it very well. So I do like 2 to 3 sauna sessions a week, and they're like 20 minutes, 20-minute sessions, or 25, and I combine it with contrast therapy.
Mhm.
So I'll sit in the sauna for 20 minutes, and then I'll go straight from the sauna to the cold plunge tub and put my feet in the tub because I have feet issues with Achilles and arthritis in my ankles, and so I'll just go back and forth. So it's 20-minute sauna, 5-minute feet plunge into the cold tub, and then I'll go right back into the sauna for another 20 to 25 minutes, and then back to the tub, and then that's it. So no more than 50 minutes of that contrast therapy protocol, and that's still only once a week for something like that.
Mhm.
And otherwise I'll just do 20 minutes. I'll just do one round, 20 minutes in the sauna, 5 minutes in the tub, and then I'm done. And it's usually at the end of a workout. But I make sure that when I come home, I'm drinking some electrolytes in order to rehydrate because when
Water.
I get out of the sauna, I am absolutely drenched. There's a nice
Right.
puddle of water that is
That
left
was my
into the sauna.
experience.
It's super disgusting, but it's doing its job. But you have to make sure that you're very purposeful with your rehydration
Right. Well, that's
after
why I
the
like the
fact.
sauna more than the hot
So
tub because I could see. I could visually
yeah,
see
it's
that
hard
I
to
was
see in the
sweating and
hot
I
tub
could
one.
yeah, the hot tub, you're hot and you're uncomfortable, but you can't see the visual of the sweat and then the and the sweat all around you when you get up.
Yeah.
But I like that. I think for runners, like, I'm thinking, because with triathlon, because you do have potentially, like, a lot of time if you're doing both the bike and the run that you might be in the heat, I do think you have to be really careful. For runners, I really think, like, 3 days a week of very specific, um heat training is probably enough, and
Mhm.
maybe doing more than that, like, you do have to be really careful, so there may be a scenario of somebody who's like, I just don't have an opportunity to, run when it's cooler in the morning," or maybe it's just, like, they're, like, training in Houston, Texas, and there's never a cooler in the morning because it's already 85 degrees, and this is my experience from my personal experience living in Houston, Texas for my dietetic internship. I remember trying to train at 5:30 in the morning, and it was already 83 degrees and
Yep.
crazy high humidity, so it never actually cooled down. Um, I did a lot of training. I did a lot of swimming actually during that time frame because
Mm,
I couldn't run so much in the heat. So you have to kind of think about, how like what our alternatives are. Like I think there is an opportunity if you need to train in the heat, like, you have to train in the heat if you have no other opportunity, then you're really going to have to adjust your expectations because um an hour run in the heat is gonna have a different stress on the body than an hour run in nicer weather, so you have
yep.
to either slow your pace down to kind of balance out that stress, which you might have to slow your pace down anyways. So you are gonna have to change your expectation, and this is where I think we had this whole conversation about minute-based approach to training. I think in the summer, specifically, if you're what might be wise to change your training plan to more of a minutes based approach because this is exactly where if you're trying to get 9 miles, let's say, but now it's 90 degrees and 90% humidity outside, that 9 miles is maybe going to be like, I mean, 30 seconds a minute slower per mile potentially. I mean, there's could be a significant amount of slowing down, and
Yeah.
having that expectation first of all, knowing that it's gonna slow down. Like, don't be in the heat thinking you're going to run the same pace. You're just setting yourself up for disaster because you're gonna fail. You're gonna hit a point where your body cannot maintain that pace because the heat is too hot. You're not able to dissipate that heat enough.
Hmm.
So having that expectation, but if that's taking you a minute or so longer per mile, I mean, you're adding at least 10 minutes to that run. So what maybe would take you, let's say, 70 minutes to complete, now is taking you almost an hour 20 or an hour 30 to complete. That's more time that you're out there too.
Yep.
So again, it's a stress equation. So if you're kind of constantly training in the heat, you have to both think about the time you're out there and the pace you're running and kind of adjust your expectations a little bit for that. And if you have the opportunity to do some of your running outside in the heat to kind of get that heat get acclimatized to the heat, but you can do some of your maybe really more intense runs on a treadmill or in a cooler environment, that would be what I would recommend. So you can still
Yep.
get the benefit of the heat. Maybe some of your like lower intensity days are out in the heat, or even some of your easy days if you can balance it all out correctly so you're not taking away from your quality days. And then doing some of those really quality workouts in a cooler environment, that would probably be the more ideal situation because even when you try to do a quality workout outside, I still feel like you need to do some of that quality work. We're actually hitting some of your goal paces, and to have it be at more of a controlled environment, and
Yeah.
then doing some of your work outside, just also for the stress piece of it, because trying to do a hard workout in the heat is just going to take a lot more out of you, even if you're adjusting your pace. I just think it just takes so much out of you to constantly do every workout in the heat. So that's how I would approach it. For an
Hmm.
athlete who, let's say this scenario is they don't live in the heat, they live somewhere where it's pretty cool most of the time. They don't really have the opportunity to do a hot training day, or even here in Colorado, like it gets hot here, but we don't have the humidity, so I don't get like the full benefit. Yeah, granted, it does get up to 95 degrees, and there are days I run in that sort of heat, but I don't have the humidity, so I'm not I'm not getting like the full on heat
Yeah.
training
It's,
that
it's
someone
gonna
might
it's gonna
get.
feel it's gonna feel different.
It's gonna feel different,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So
So,
you going from Fort Collins, Colorado, down to Florida, and let's say that
yeah, just
you're gonna run a marathon in Florida, even though you're heat acclimated and you have altitude, you running in humidity is going to feel so much harder.
different. Yeah, it's such a
So
difference. Even
it's
just going
completely
from
different.
here to New York where it was not that hot. There was a few hot days, but it was humid.
Yeah.
In Vermont, we had a 90-degree day and a humid day that I did run. I was actually grateful I got the opportunity to do that because it was a little bit more humid in Minnesota too. But yeah, if it had been a hot race in Minnesota and I had gone from here, even if I'd done the heat training and gone to Minnesota with the humidity, I wouldn't have been prepared. And I'm not really sure. Maybe a sauna, like a humid sauna, or maybe
Yeah.
there's ways you could try to get used to that because I'm not entirely sure I would have been prepared for the humidity of it
Mm,
being up here. It's so dry, it just sucks you it's like a raisin living up here. You just have all the moisture sucked out of you, essentially. So you're, and I think it's a different kind of feel. Like I can do a 95-degree day here, still have to slow down my pace, but it's just not the same as what it would be like in Florida at the same temperature with a higher
yeah.
humidity. So that's also something, and then that's why the dew point, and we have had a conversation before about heat where we talked a lot about dew point, things like that. But you do have to kind of consider that when you're
Mhm.
adjusting your goals and expectations for your training runs and things. But it is a different kind of heat. So would
Yep.
I benefit from maybe a sauna, like a humid sauna? Probably, if I were gonna go train. Luckily, I'm not going to go do another race anytime soon in Florida or
Yeah.
anything like that. But it's just things you want to consider is thinking about the race environment. Where are you training, and what's the potential, for where you're going to be? What is it like? And trying to do the best you can in your training, at least to acclimate to that, which is hard sometimes when it comes to altitude or humidity if you're not in a humid or high altitude environment. So, yeah. I don't know your thoughts.
Yeah, so
I don't know
for
if you have a runner, like, is there anything
yeah,
um
so I guess I would say if you have a mix of both passive and active protocol for heat acclimation in your training plan, for all of the ones that are active, so that means that you're doing a workout outside.
mhm,
I almost recommend just removing pace from your watch completely. Don't even look at it. Don't even be tempted. I would remove it from the screen completely, and I would just have time and heart rate on there, and
mhm,
use those two as a barometer. We're not racing by heart rate, but it's still good to kind of see. I want you to see and reconcile, like, what is my heart rate in the humidity? Because one thing that I experienced in a race, I did Ironman North Carolina 70.3, and I got off the bike, and it was hot. I mean, it was hot outside and a little humid, and I looked down at my watch and I saw that my heart rate was like 165, 175, and I had just come out of transition out to the run. And so it freaked me out because I never looked at heart rate during my training. And so when I glanced down and saw my heart rate, I had no baseline to say, like, what should my heart rate be. I just saw that really high number and it freaked me out, and I adjusted my execution not really knowing. I was like, okay, what is that, what it should be? So at least having some kind of experience on what that heart rate is going to be during those types of efforts at least will allow you to put into context what you see on race day. Even though you may have pace and heart rate and all kinds of other stuff on your watch when you execute a race, just having that experience on what that number is going to be or could be, I think is going to be
mhm,
valuable. But I think having pace on there removes the tendency to try and chase performance from that perspective, and then starting to say, no, my zone two pace is this, and so I need to validate myself and make myself feel like, okay, I am making progress. I need to be able to hold my zone two pace. And you get out in the heat and you can't maintain that zone two pace, and you start chasing it. Now you're starting to dig the hole, and
mhm,
it's going to be hard to dig to get out of that hole and to recover, rather than just say, hey, I want to run by effort. I want to run by feel. But you know what zone two feels like, and you don't need a pace to tell you what it is. You just know what it feels like. Now
mhm,
go and run with that. That's what I tell my athletes, and that's what I do in my own training plans. Like, I'm removed pace from my watch. I know how it feels to run comfortably. Is it hard? Yeah, because it's freaking hot outside. So it's going to feel hard, but I've
You're gonna
got
be
nothing.
uncomfortable, yeah.
I've got nothing going on there that's judging performance
Right,
at the
yeah, you're just
time.
going
I'll,
based.
I'll judge performance after the fact and say,
Yeah,
okay, how successful was that? And
right,
say, okay, well, maybe that's the pace that I can see on race day under those kind of conditions, but I didn't
mhm,
purposefully go out and chase that pace. I
right,
used it after the fact to reinforce, okay, now I'm starting to build expectations. Because if I have a race that's in, uh, let's say April or May, and I spent that whole winter training outside, you know, my performance outside during the race is going to be different than what I saw during training because I trained in the cold and trained in the cool weather. And now I'm forcing my body to race in something that's not like that. You're going to have to adjust those expectations. You can't say, oh, I went out and, this winter I was able to hold an 8-minute mile. And my race is in May. Now that 8-minute mile is going to be hard. That's going to be hard to maintain, even though you have the fitness that's there. Heat. How can I describe it? It's an equalizer. You do not observe your full potential when you're racing in heat. You have the fitness, and you're not getting slower. You're not getting weaker. You're just running in more adverse conditions.
Right, and it feels like you. I think that's the hardest part about summer is you just feel like you're you just feel like you're slow, like,
Yeah.
I mean, even for workouts, like, this is you're talking just zone 2, but I mean, I don't have any specifically pulled up, but there are calculators you can use online if you have let's say you have a workout and you're supposed to do, like, 5K pace or something. There are calculators you can put in the temperature or the dew point or those parameters and put it in, it'll kinda give you what you would want to aim for that, a guesstimate. Obviously, nothing's absolutely like, precise, but it helps you, and that's something I use sometimes just because for me, I have a really hard time with that. It's like that concept that heat I know it's my body's working harder. I know I have to adjust my pace, but I struggle with it, and
Yeah.
because I'm like, "Well, I have this pa," I'm like most runners, I'm kinda, like, stuck on a pace idea, so having that calculator, something that's kind of, like, giving me a estimation of what I need to slow down for how much I need to slow down actually helps me because then I can adjust my goal and then I don't know, it just helps me figure that out because I do a lot
Yeah.
of my training, especially like what as I adjust to 5K training, like I'm going to do a lot of my training focusing on that pace. That's just the way that's the way it is, like kind of keeping I have pace goals in mind. And if it's hot outside, I know I need to adjust it, but for some reason my mind just struggles with that. And then I feel like I'm losing fitness and my workouts are going terrible even though it's like 90 degrees out. So I will look at that and use those calculators sometimes and it helps me because then I'm like okay, like there is this justification for sort of like slowing down and I don't know. So if that helps someone, but it is a hard time of the year because there's so much of it is just slow. You think you're just running slow. You think your performance is declining even though it's not. And that's why I do love those fall races because you have all of those moments in the heat and then you find it all kind of comes together for you when the weather
Yeah.
cools and you're like, "Oh, wait a second, actually I'm in fabulous shape,"
Yep.
So just keep that in mind. That happens to everyone struggling in the heat this time of year and you will realize. But if you are running in a hot race, you like we were sort of talking about this, Justin, you can't really it's probably gonna be really hard for you to have a PR even if you do all of the heat training and you're ready,
Right.
because it's still gonna slow you down, like, there's no way to overcome that. So you have to kind of maybe adjust your expectations for the race anyways, but you're gonna be a lot better off and have a lot better result even if it's not a PR. I mean, who knows, but you might have a really good result because you've heat trained. So, the
Yeah.
expectation probably needs to adjust anyways, but you'll be far better off than someone who hasn't adjusted to the heat.
Yeah.
But if mm, but if you are training all throughout the summer and you have like a November, October race and it's cool, you'll see the
You'll see it.
you'll
Yeah.
see
It'll show up.
you'll see the benefit of it.
Yeah,
Which is
if I
fun.
if I had to compare it to something that we've talked about a lot, and is that fatigue masks fitness,
Mhm,
heat does the exact same thing. So
mhm,
heat behaves a lot like fatigue does. So
yeah,
once the heat is gone, then it's easier to observe the fitness that you've accumulated. You can't observe the fitness in the heat, just like you can't observe the fitness when you're under fatigued. It's
right.
when you shed the fatigue is when you observe fitness. Likewise, when you shed the heat, now you can start to observe what your potential is and the fitness that you've accumulated in it. So
Mhm.
that's when you can see your potential.
Yeah,
is once all those are
absolutely.
gone. So
Heat train, no.
heat
Should be
train.
either
I mean,
way, whether you have a hot race or you are just gearing
it's
for
something
something in
that
the
you have
fall.
to do. It's
Right.
mandatory.
And
So,
I even
you know,
think in the
like,
wintertime, it's making me think, like, I tried to do some hot tub training, but
yep.
it's like trying to figure out ways, even if it's a passive heat, because unless you are willing to bundle into 5 different sweatshirts to run on your treadmill in the middle of the winter to, and have the hot I guess you could have, like, the heater next to you, but that seems like a lot of effort. Um, maybe that's where even some passive heat training in the winter might be worth a little bit of thought for people, because especially if they have spring races, because again, there's that benefit you get even if
Mhm.
the race itself isn't in the heat. So, more to think about there, but I know I have to run in, like, a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean,
This has been
especially
a
if you're thinking about doing like Ironman Texas, which is
uh,
in April, and most of your
oh,
training
yeah.
is going to take place during the wintertime, this is something that you should be considering. Because
Mhm,
as I said at the beginning of this episode, I don't care how good your training plan is. I don't care how creative your workouts are and how you've increased your FTP or anything like that, because the heat will wipe all of that out. It does not matter on how consistent you were or how, creative your training plan was. If you cannot race in the heat, it does not matter.
mhm.
So,
Yep.
but yeah,
There you go.
I know you got to get going. And so let's
Yeah,
wrap this thing up. So
sure. Yeah.
I want to thank you guys for joining us. This has been episode 107, 107 episodes. Wow. It's kind of it's something nice
Kind
to
of
think
hard to
about.
contemplate, but yeah.
So thank you guys for joining us. We greatly appreciate the time that you dial in with us. If this episode has been helpful to you, or if you know somebody else who's got a hot race that's coming up, and you're like, hey, have you thought about heat acclimation? If you haven't, here, listen to this episode. Share it with somebody else. If it helps you start to think about how you want to handle heat and you have a race coming up, we hope that you have found this helpful. Please leave a review and a comment wherever it is that you're consuming your podcast content from. Give us a couple stars or whatever and put a comment. Those are greatly appreciated. It does help the exposure of the podcast and help us get a little bit higher up in the list so that people can find us a little bit easier, because we do not have commercials. We do not have sponsors or anything like that. So you're not interrupted with commercials on Spotify or whatever. And we're not trying to sell you hemp mattresses and supplements and all that junk. So we hope that you enjoy that actually, and that you're grateful for it. So in order to keep this going, we want to increase the exposure of the podcast. Those comments and reviews are helpful. If you listen to us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe there or any of the other podcast platforms. Subscribe so you don't miss any of the future episodes that come out. We mentioned at the beginning of the podcast the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group. So it's that private group on Facebook. You just answer one simple question, it lets you right on in and agree to the group rules. This is where we have some additional interactions with listeners. There will be a poll that'll be coming out as well. So to see what kind of content you like, I've been actually thinking about going out there pretty soon and throwing out some Q&A questions for people and see if we
Mm,
can get some podcast topics that you would like for us to cover, and or at least answer some of your questions. I know that you guys aren't going to come to us with questions, so I'll go to you and ask if you have questions. So keep an eye out on that. That's something that I would like to do. As we say all the time, we're both active coaches, and so we're bringing on athletes onto our rosters. So if you would like some help in your endurance journey and you're thinking about bringing on a coach to help you progress, we hope that you'll consider one or both of us as your coach, because Katie does dietetics for all sports. She also does run coaching and run plans. So if you would like to reach out to Katie, you can go to fuel2run.com. If you're thinking about taking on a multi-sport or single sport coaching, I do custom one-on-one coaching as well as custom built training plans. You can go to tabularosaracing.com and reach out to me. Both of us have additional content on our websites where we have blogs and documentaries and everything else that's out there as well. So take advantage of those free resources to you. You can see what our coaching philosophies are, and you can find out, if our personalities fit. And it's an important relationship when you bring on a coach. So check us out and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or if you'd like to talk. Happy to do that. So again, thank you guys for joining us. On this episode of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, this has been episode 107 on heat acclimation and heat training. I've been your host, Coach Justin, along with Coach Katie, and we look forward to coming to you again next time. Until then, happy training, everyone.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye. That wraps up today's episode of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Endurance sports have a way of teaching us patience, humility, and resilience, lessons that carry far beyond the workout. Progress in endurance sports doesn't come from shortcuts. It comes from consistency, discipline, and doing the work when it's not glamorous. Wherever you are on your endurance journey, keep trusting the process and honoring the work you put in each day. If today's episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone to help on their endurance journey. Don't forget to join the conversation on our social sites to help build and foster a community where we all learn and support one another. We'll be back with more stories and insights from Coach Justin and Katie. Until then, visit the podcast website at theenduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com for more episodes from the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Feel free to send us an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.